Today is Tuesday, January 24th. We have new details about not just one, but two shooting rampages in California in a matter of days, as authorities try to figure out what motivated the gunmen. Also, a man who once had the most important anti-spy jobs in the U.S. government was arrested, who he's accused of working with while also working for the FBI. Plus, a new vaccine strategy from the FDA, another big investment in artificial intelligence, and why the M&am's brand is getting rid of its candy mascots, at least for now. Those stories and more news coming up. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. Unfortunately, we start today with California's second mass shooting in just 3 days. At least 7 people were shot and killed at a mushroom farm and trucking firm in Half Moon Bay near San Francisco. The suspect was found in his car outside a sheriff's office, so authorities took him into custody. One city official said all of the victims were Chinese farm workers, and the shooter reportedly worked at one of the places he targeted. So far, authorities have not given an exact motive, but the FBI is helping local officials investigate. California's governor was briefed about that shooting while visiting victims of another mass shooting from over the weekend, the one that happened in Monterey Park just outside of Los Angeles. The death toll from that one is now up to 11. Investigators still don't know exactly what led that gunman to open fire inside one dance hall and try to shoot up another. But detectives say he would often go to the 2 studios he targeted, and it's possible he was motivated by jealousy over a relationship. And sadly, we have one more shooting we have to tell you about this morning. This one happened at an alternative educational program for at-risk youth in Des Moines, Iowa. Police say an 18-year-old shot 3 people there. Investigators say it was a targeted attack, not random. 2 teens were killed, and the program's founder was seriously hurt. The shooter was arrested. A former top agent with the FBI is now accused of working for a Russian oligarch he was supposed to be investigating. Federal prosecutors say Charles McGonigal was involved with Oleg Deripaska, a wealthy Russian businessman with ties to President Putin. They say McGonigal worked to get Deripaska off the U.S. sanctions list and took secret payments for investigating one of Deripaska's rivals. And with that, McGonigal was arrested by agents from the bureau where he worked for 22 years, making him one of the highest-ranking former FBI officials to ever be charged with a crime. McGonigal is not saying much about his charges, but he's pleading not guilty. Current and former U.S. officials tell the Washington Post that they're shocked by these accusations, partly because, as a senior U.S. intelligence official, McGonigal was involved in some of the most sensitive and high-profile intelligence cases in the U.S. government. For example, he was tapped to lead the task force investigating WikiLeaks. And he also had a role in Robert Mueller's investigation that looked into whether Russia interfered in the 2016 election. If found guilty, McGonigal could spend the rest of his life in prison. Well, this week, a jury convicted members of a far-right extremist group for their role in the January 6th riot. This is one of the most serious criminal cases so far related to the Capitol invasion. 4 so-called Oath Keepers were found guilty of rare seditious conspiracy charges that essentially accuses them of trying to overturn the government by trying to prevent the peaceful transition of power from one president to the next. The Oath Keepers' leader, Stuart Rhodes, was found guilty of the same thing just a couple of months ago. And lawyers for these 4 members say Rhodes was the, quote, real bad guy. They tried to paint their clients as followers. But a jury seemed to agree with prosecutors that they all took part in a thought-out plan and didn't just invade the Capitol spontaneously. They each face up to 20 years in prison. Overall, nearly 1,000 people have been charged in connection to the Capitol riot so far, and the investigation still is not over. But very few people are facing charges quite so serious. These could be the biggest changes to COVID-19 vaccines since boosters rolled out. The FDA wants to make the vaccines a lot more like flu shots in that most people would get an updated shot once a year. The Federal Health Agency would just recommend that people who are older or immunocompromised get 2 a year. It's all in an effort to streamline the whole process that up until now has included a regimen of initial shots followed by boosters with lots of different recommendations for different ages and different brands of vaccines, not to mention how the messaging changes depending on what variant is circulating. And it's all been kind of tough for public health officials to communicate. Some health experts think the complexity of it all could be why so few Americans have gotten the latest boosters. So the FDA outlined the new proposals, and it plans to ask an advisory panel for feedback later this week. The FDA does not have to go with what the panel says, but it usually does follow their advice. To be continued. More news is still coming up, but first, let's take a quick break for our sponsor. I'm guessing one of the things you appreciate about this podcast is that you get a lot of news in a short amount of time, because I know we're all busy. Well, Green Chef allows you to eat well without having to think about what's for dinner every night or getting all the ingredients at the grocery store. Instead, Green Chef's pre-made and pre-measured sauces, dressings, and spices make keeping a healthy lifestyle even easier. My husband and I recently made chicken with garlic charred rice with apricot pan sauce and roasted almonds. It was truly delicious, nutritious, and felt kind of fancy. Yet we made everything start to finish within 30 minutes. Or Green Chef now even offers 10-minute lunches. You can listen to this podcast while you make it, and your lunch will be ready by the time you get your news. By the way, Green Chef is now owned by HelloFresh, and now my listeners can enjoy both brands at a discount with me. Go to greenchef.com/newsworthy60 and use code newsworthy60 to get 60% off plus free shipping. Again, simply go to greenchef.com/newsworthy60 and use code newsworthy60 to get 60% off plus free shipping. It looks like the worst of the so-called triple-demic could be behind us. New CDC data shows for the first time in months, COVID-19, RSV, and the flu are all trending down in the U.S. Well, at least the cases that are bad enough to send people to emergency rooms. And the decline is being seen across all age groups. This is much different from this time last year when COVID-19 especially had hospitals overwhelmed. But it's not clear how long this trend will last, especially since infectious disease experts say the vaccination rates for COVID-19 and flu are still lagging. And as you know, there is not an approved vaccine for RSV on the market yet. But the good news is healthcare experts say the U.S. is now much better equipped than earlier on in the pandemic to handle any surges of respiratory illnesses. Spotify became the latest tech company to announce mass layoffs. The music streaming company says it's cutting about 6% of its workforce, which adds up to about 600 people. Spotify CEO says he's taking full accountability, explaining that it now costs more to keep Spotify running than the company is making. Because, as he put it, I was too ambitious in investing ahead of our revenue growth. Spotify is also saying goodbye to its head of content, who was behind those big exclusive deals with Joe Rogan, Kim Kardashian, Prince Harry, former President Obama, and more. Of course, Spotify is not alone. In recent months, other tech powerhouses have also been cutting jobs like Amazon, Meta, Twitter, Microsoft, and Google's parent company Alphabet. In total, reports say more than 200,000 tech industry workers have been laid off since last year. Even though Microsoft is cutting some staff, it's expanding another big part of its business. The software company says it's making a multi-billion-dollar investment in OpenAI. That's the artificial intelligence lab behind the popular online chatbot ChatGPT. Microsoft did not comment on the exact terms of the deal, but sources told the New York Times it was worth $10 billion on top of the $3 billion Microsoft already invested. Now the company says it's hoping to bring AI into all of its products. Already it started adding OpenAI technology to its search engine, Bing, which could help it become a more serious rival to the industry leader, Google. But as Reuters reports, Google is planning its own AI reveal for this spring. The iconic M&am's characters are taking a bit of a break in response to partisan backlash. Yes, we are talking about those cartoon characters in M&am's commercials that look like candy with arms, legs, and faces. The candy company explained that controversy started last year when it upgraded the M&am's mascots' looks, and the team behind those changes apparently didn't know if anyone would even notice. But they did. Some commentators were pretty upset when they saw the green M&am's boots were replaced with sneakers and the brown M&am's stilettos were replaced with smaller heels. The M&am's brand said it was about giving them a more modern look. But critics said they were trying to be too woke, embracing what they saw as a liberal agenda gone too far. So this week, M&M said, quote, "We get it. Even a candy's shoes can be polarizing," which was the last thing M&M's wanted. And with that, the company said the spokes candies will be taking an indefinite pause. For now, they're being replaced with the comedy actress Maya Rudolph in an ad campaign that will launch during the Super Bowl. The famous Splash Mountain ride at Disney World has officially closed for good after more than 30 years. And its very last day in service, it broke an all-time park record for the longest wait times ever. People actually waited more than 3 hours to take one more run on Splash Mountain, which is, of course, way longer than usual and even longer than it usually takes to ride highly anticipated attractions on their opening days. But people apparently wanted to say goodbye. Wait times have actually been higher than average over the whole last month. Now the water ride is getting a complete makeover and will reopen as a Princess and the Frog attraction next year. The original Splash Mountain was based on a 1946 movie called Song of the South, which has been accused of having racist stereotypes. The Splash Mountain at California's Disneyland is also slated to close soon, but the specific date hasn't been announced yet. Well, that's it for the main news, so now it's time for Trivia Tuesday, when we ask a different trivia question every week. But first, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. I know certain things I do in my life help me feel my best. They don't always happen, but I know when I do things like short meditations, work out, connect with friends and family, and even go to therapy, I am the best version of myself. Yes, a therapist is part of that. Therapy can help sort things out when life feels overwhelming. And I know when I have more clarity, I have more calm and confidence. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a flexible, convenient, affordable option that is entirely online. So just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. And I do think it's important to find the right therapist for you as an individual, and it's really easy to switch on BetterHelp if needed. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/newsworthy today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/newsworthy. Now back to Trivia Tuesday. Today's trivia question is, who was the first man to fly solo and nonstop across the Atlantic? You can answer the question and play along with us on Instagram. Find and follow us at NewsworthyPod. And look for the trivia quiz in our Instagram stories today. As for last week's trivia question, how many amendments are there to the U.S. Constitution? The answer is 27. Since the Constitution was first ratified back in 1789, hundreds of thousands of bills have been introduced with proposed amendments. But it's definitely not easy to actually amend the Constitution. Each new amendment has to have support from at least 2/3 of both the House and the Senate and 3/4 of all states. So only 27 have gotten that far. The first one is arguably the most famous. It's the one that guarantees the freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, and the freedom to petition the government. Then, of course, there's a Second Amendment that gives Americans the right to bear arms. A couple more we think are especially worth noting include the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery and the 19th Amendment that gave women the right to vote. Well, thank you so much for listening today. We always appreciate your support, whether you are sharing the show on social media or with friends and family, leaving a review, or becoming a Newsworthy Insider. We're so grateful for that monthly support. We'll be back with another news roundup tomorrow. Until then, have a great day.